Welcome back, guys. We're back on another Solvable Mysteries episode. My name is Juras, and as every week, I'm joined by my co-host Glenn. Hi, Cove. How are you feeling, dude? Is everything swell on your end, man?
Yeah, man, it's getting beautiful out there. The weather's picking up out here. Things are getting, it's like the prettiest time of year where I live. And I feel like we're having an early spring. Um, but interestingly, there's also the case today also involves not my immediate area, but like not really too far from where I live, and definitely areas that I know in some cases kind of well. Um, so it's pretty interesting. I also just as I know I'm teasing the case a little bit tonight, but I think one of the other things I thought of as I was doing the research ahead of the case was going through some of the materials. Sometimes I wonder if it's as fun or interesting for the audience to go through this stuff as I am, because there's a couple key pieces of let's say, there's not a lot to look at really as far as media. So there's like these same pieces of media that are in some cases long, some cases short. It'll be interesting to see how the audience interprets versus what we kind of hash out tonight on this specific and pretty recent case.
Yep, definitely. A pretty recent case. Without any further ado, we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Heidi Planck. This is an interesting case for sure. It happened recently, and this woman, Heidi Planck, might still be alive because she's only missing for around a little over than 4 months at this point. Now, I want to jump into the case introduction, and then let's analyze what really happened to Heidi Planck. Heidi Planck is an American woman who disappeared on October 17th, 2021, after leaving her son's football game in the Los Angeles suburb of Downey. Heidi was 39 when she disappeared last October. She weighs around 120 pounds, is 5 foot 3 in height, has blonde hair, and blue eyes. When she was last seen, Heidi Planck was wearing jeans and a gray sweater, and she was driving her 2017 gray Range Rover. Heidi has an 11-year-old son named Bond Wayne that she has been raising together with her ex-husband, Jim Wayne, who is a prominent Beverly Hills hairstylist. Heidi and Jim have been divorced for 9 years at this point, but they remained on good terms. It's worth mentioning that Jim has other kids, while Heidi only has one child. Jim stated that he was a stricter parent than Heidi. Heidi had a more relaxed parenting style. At the time of her disappearance, Heidi worked as a financial controller at Camden Capital Partners, which is a wealth management company for high net worth families, business owners, and entrepreneurs. Heidi also had a boyfriend named Naeem Salam. Naeem lives in San Francisco, while Heidi lived in Los Angeles. Therefore, seeing each other was a bit of a hassle for the couple. Naeem Salam works as the vice president of operations at the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Facebook's philanthropic organization. When she first started working at Camden Capital Partners, Heidi was an assistant. However, over the next 5 years, she rose to the financial controller position. On October 17th, 2021, the day when she disappeared, Heidi left her rented townhouse near the Culver City Arts District and got into her silver Range Rover with her dog named Seven. She then drove to Downey, where she met up with her ex-husband Jim Wayne in order to watch their son's football game. Now, during the game, Heidi seemed bothered by something. Witnesses described her as fidgety and distracted. During the halftime, Heidi abruptly left the game. This was the last time her ex-husband and her son ever saw her. For the next 3 days, ex-husband Jim Wayne and Heidi's son Bond became increasingly alarmed as they tried to contact Heidi. On October 18th at 7:30 p.m., Bond texted Heidi, quote, "Can you please call me back? I called you 2 days in a row and you haven't picked up." End quote. The next day, on October 19th, Bond texted Heidi again, stating in his texts, quote, "Please call or just text me because I want to make sure you're okay and I'm worried about you." Later that same day, he texted, quote, "Please call mom. I miss you and I'm worried about you." End quote. On October 20th, 3 days into Heidi's disappearance, Jim Wayne drove to the West Los Angeles police station to file a missing person report after Heidi had failed to pick up Bond at his private school in Westwood. When police arrived at Heidi's home, there were no signs of Heidi nor her dog Seven. Heidi's Range Rover was also missing. On the other hand, her work cell phone was in the house, along with her work laptop. Nothing seemed out of place inside of her home. Jim Wayne tried calling Heidi's current boyfriend, Naeem Salam, who told Jim that he hadn't seen Heidi in a while because of work. However, he said that Heidi sent him an alarming text message telling him that, quote, "she was afraid," end quote, and asking him to come down to Los Angeles on the weekend she had vanished. According to Jim Wayne, Naeem told him he couldn't make it to LA after receiving that alarming text message from Heidi. Jim tried using the location tracking system in order to locate Heidi's Range Rover. However, the system was turned off in her car. The location finder on Heidi's earbuds and Apple Watch had also been shut off. Jim found this very suspicious, stating, quote, "It was really odd that had to be done deliberately, systematically," end quote. Luckily, Heidi's dog Seven had been chipped. Before Jim could get to the family's vet in order to see if there was any way to track Seven's location, Heidi's work phone received a text message regarding Seven's location. Now, the text message came from an occupant of a high-rise luxury apartment complex called the Hope and Flower Building. This luxury apartment complex is located in downtown LA. Seven had been found several days earlier on October 17th, just hours after the football game, wandering around the 28th floor. Later on, Heidi's Range Rover has also been located near the apartment complex, indicating that she didn't drive away from the building. Jim Wayne, as well as the LAPD, said that Heidi Planck had no known connections to the area or the building itself. For unknown reasons, the building's management was initially reluctant to cooperate with law enforcement, but ultimately, after a warrant was issued, they handed over their surveillance footage. After looking at the CCTV footage, law enforcement managed to find a video that showed Heidi walking Seven in an alley behind the apartment complex. Heidi was now wearing the sweater that had earlier been tied around her waist at her son's football game. This was Heidi's last known location. On October 29th, 11 days after Heidi's disappearance, law enforcement entered Heidi's townhouse with guns drawn. The reasoning for using guns is unclear. Perhaps they suspected she was being held there against her will. However, once they entered the house, they found nothing suspicious. Suspicions were raised regarding how Heidi could afford to rent a $1.7 million townhouse and afford to own a top-of-the-line Range Rover. Ex-husband Jim Wayne stated, quote, "All I know is that she always had piles of cash and took a lot of vacations. She told me that her boss floats her money when they close a deal," end quote. Things got even more shady when it was realized that Heidi's boss is currently on trial for a massive financial fraud case, and the company that Heidi worked for, Camden Capital Partners, is actually registered to Heidi's rented townhouse, and Heidi is listed as the only employee. More on Heidi's boss shortly. Heidi's family court documents revealed that Heidi had experienced a lot of turmoil and psychological issues, as well as substance abuse, including an addiction to benzos and Adderall. Heidi's mental health and drug problems were apparently a key component of her and Jim Wayne's custody battle over their son Bond in the years after their divorce. On one occasion back in October of 2015, Heidi had suffered a psychotic break after showing up late to pick up then 5-year-old Bond from Jim's hair salon. Now, while Jim was driving Heidi and Bond back to Heidi's home, Heidi suddenly became pale and disoriented, stating, quote, "I can't be in here, it's too intense," end quote. Now, Jim managed to get them to Heidi's place, but as soon as he turned around, Heidi called in distress and asked him to come back and take them to his house. Now, when Wayne entered Heidi's house, he saw her sitting outside inexplicably holding a plate of bacon, which she tried to get him to eat. Jim thought she might be intoxicated, but by the time they all arrived back to his house, Heidi seemed to have calmed down. Shortly after, Jim heard his son Bond shouting for him, quote, "Dad, you have to come to see my room, Mom made a mess," end quote. Heidi had apparently ransacked the boy's bedroom, then squeezed herself out his window and hopped a neighbor's fence. Minutes later, another neighbor called the police after spotting Heidi climbing on roofs and over fences. When the police arrived, they found Heidi partially clothed and switching an electrical circuit breaker on the street on and off. Heidi had voluntarily checked herself into a psychiatric hospital according to court records, but a day later she called Jim again, begging him to take her home, claiming she was being molested there. Heidi also asked Jim, quote, "Why do I have a C-section scar? We don't have children," end quote. Then she hung up the phone. Apparently, she had forgotten about her son Bond. By 2017, Heidi seemed to have gotten her life together as she started working for Camden Capital Partners as an assistant. Her new boss was Jason Sugarman, who in 2019 would be investigated and subsequently charged by the Securities and Exchange Commission for a highly complex tribal bonds scheme that allegedly defrauded Native Americans of some $43 million. Jason Sugarman's partner at Camden Capital Partners was a man named Jason Glenn. Together, the two of them were accused of using investments from their Native American clients to purchase things like apartments in Tribeca for themselves. Jason Galanis pleaded guilty to securities fraud and is serving 15 years in a minimum security prison in San Pedro, while Jason Sugarman's trial is still unwinding in New York, and he is still a free man. Heidi was never implicated in this scandal, however she did rise through the ranks at the company, and some believe that she personally knows a lot of shady information regarding her boss, Jason Sugarman, that could potentially cause him harm. When Jim Wayne contacted Jason Sugarman about Heidi's disappearance, he didn't seem to be too concerned. He wouldn't even get on the phone and instead had his assistant deal with the matter. All this assistant would say was that Jason Sugarman wanted Heidi's work laptop back. Sugarman did something very bizarre the following day after receiving the call from Jim Wayne. He actually drove to Heidi's house, who had been missing for quite a while at that point, and rang the doorbell. When no one opened the door, he left a box of pastries by her front door. Why Sugarman was delivering snacks to a woman he knew to be missing is unknown. On the same day that Sugarman had left pastries at Heidi's home, Jim Wayne had received a follow-up call from Sugarman's assistant asking him again for the laptop, claiming there was sensitive information on it. Nevertheless, Jim had already turned the computer over to the FBI at that point. The assistant also stated that Jason Sugarman believes Heidi had ran away with some of the company's money. Now, Jim, on the other hand, believes that his ex-wife would never steal and that she would never leave her 11-year-old son behind. There are a few prominent theories in Heidi's disappearance. It is possible that Heidi might still be alive and had started a new life with the company's money. She did seem to be living above her means. However, it seems unlikely that she would voluntarily leave her son behind. Also, the fact that her dog was left abandoned at a random apartment complex in downtown LA indicates potential foul play. It's also possible, given her psychological history, that Heidi had suffered some sort of a psychotic episode that caused her to lose her life. However, if this was the case, it's interesting that not a single clue about her fate was uncovered and her body was never found. And lastly, there is the theory that Heidi's job was somehow connected to her disappearance and that Jason Sugarman had arranged her disappearance in order to protect himself and his business. Heidi was the financial controller at Camden Partners, therefore it's possible she may have known shady information about Jason Sugarman, a man investigated in connection to a massive fraud case. In late November of last year, law enforcement conducted a search at a landfill in Chiquita Canyon, miles away from Heidi's townhouse and the luxury apartment complex she had last been spotted at. The search was sparked after law enforcement found, quote, undisclosed forensic evidence, end quote, at the Hope and Flower apartment complex where Heidi's dog Seven was eventually found. At the time of this recording, Heidi is missing for a little over 4 months. So this is the general introduction into the case. Dude, your initial thoughts about the disappearance of Heidi Planck?
Man, I mean, it sounds a little bit shallow, but at first I was just even wondering how it was I didn't hear about this. I guess maybe just a lot was going on at the time, and this was during the holidays, right? Or not during the holidays, but like kind of adjacent to
It was
I
October
don't know, a lot of
17th. Yeah.
October. Yeah, I mean it's before Halloween. Okay, so beginning of fall. Yeah, I mean it's like a pretty strange case. Now I have some pretty strong thoughts and about some of the theories. I think it's also interesting that I wish we knew a little more about like her life growing up, because um some of the, I guess, the substances mentioned, like specifically Adderall, that's sort of interesting because there's a medical use for that, and some of her behavior sort of seems similar to somebody that might have a medical condition that would actually be legitimately prescribed for. Now she was, as we'll get into, she was abusing it. She was doing more than someone who was prescribed that was supposed to be doing. But it's interesting to think that like there's sort of a complex picture. I was also kind of amazed. I'll just my initial impressions, uh, that somebody who had had a massive psychological breakdown was like just a couple of years later comptroller of this company, wheeling and dealing and doing big multi-million dollar deals. Like this wasn't even the bond thing that you mentioned wasn't even like all that they were doing. There's even, as we'll get into, there's some way bigger deals going on with this company, and there's some connections in some maybe scary places.
Mm.
So yeah, this is gonna be a weird episode, and I'm gonna put this disclaimer in the front. we may mention some names that are connected to politics. When we mention them, we always give this disclaimer that we're not a political show. So when someone gets mentioned, it's completely going to be apolitical. That I say this because a certain name might come up, and like I really don't want people to think that like this is about that person or this is about, you know what I mean, all the stuff about that person, whether what you believe. It's more like um, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of corruption in the world, and it seems like the maybe some of the people that Heidi was working for were very deeply enmeshed in a lot of different kinds of kind of financial wheeling and dealing, not all of which apparently was legal.
Yeah, good point. Good point. I think the best way to handle this episode, because this is a episode that goes in a lot of different directions, is to just jump through the interesting details that we have noted down. I see that the Adderall habit is something that you found interesting. You already talked about that. Maybe we will jump back to this when we conclude this episode in the theory section. Now, I would like to also jump to some of the interesting details that I spotted personally. And I guess let's just really jump right into the timeline. And if you see that you want to add like some additional interesting points that you found, worthy of like discussing today to have like a productive conversation, I think you definitely do need to like step in and be like, yo, I want to talk about this. But now the first thing that I want to talk about is the day started off seemingly fairly normal for Heidi Planck. We can see this on the YouTube channel for everyone who's listening to this and watching as well. I have extracted the CCTV from a news report, and we can see this is the initial day. You know what I mean? We can see Heidi leaving her townhouse with her dog Seven. This is the dog Seven on the screen. The same dog that will be later, on the same day actually, found in that luxury apartment complex in downtown LA. We can see this is Heidi Planck. She is. It's worth mentioning that she is wearing a sweater over her waist. She will later put this sweater over her during the evening, and she's just leaving to see the game, to see her son's Bonds, football game. Now, the interesting point for me is initially that during halftime, she abruptly leaves the game, and she was reportedly acting fidgety and, how should I put it, not like her usual self during the football game. Do you have any thoughts? Because I think you might have a certain theory why this was, right?
Yeah, I mean, so unfortunately, it gets back to the Adderall a bit because it does sound like she had a pretty bad problem with it. And I was looking at the side effects of Adderall because it's the amphetamine. Now, to people that maybe not super familiar with drugs or substances, that sounds a lot like methamphetamine, right? And it's because they're like, I think I'm not a chemist or a pharmacist, but I think they're related. One is, I think, a subset of the other. Um, anyway, yeah. So side effects for Adderall include like anxiety, um, like nausea, not feeling good, discomfort. But I would also say some of the behavior. I don't know if you've ever had to, if you've ever known anybody who has like severe ADHD, moderate to severe. I mean, the behavior. You know what I'm talking about?
Other than myself, no. You know what I mean?
I mean, I know. I feel that like I mean, I say to my kid too, where it's like, well, it's sometimes so hard to kind of pay attention to something that's boring. And apparently that's actually, it's interesting. I was just reading about this. That's what Adderall does. People always wonder, like, why is it you would give someone with ADHD like what's basically speed, right? So it's amphetamine. It has the same effects as that's what it is. It's legal speed. Um, well, it turns out it treats a condition. I guess it's like helping create more dopamine. I think something like that for people whose brains do not have enough of it. I guess that's why there's not enough pleasure in the current activity, whatever it is. I think it's harder to apply yourself to something boring. So something like Adderall, I think actually increases pleasure to normal levels for someone that doesn't have the normal levels. Unfortunately, when you already have the normal levels, it can kind of create all these other side effects. And then, like just like methamphetamine addiction, it's the same kind of stuff where you can really run yourself ragged and eventually psychotic. So part of me is really not surprised that she had a big, crazy, I mean, the freak out when I was reading it, my mouth was almost open. I was like, wow, this is like, this is before your time. You're asked, I don't think you were born yet. Robert Downey Jr. used to be, now he's like Iron Man and he's like the one of the best actors in Hollywood and totally cleaned up and like very professional. But there was a period in the 90s where Robert Downey Jr. was literally getting high and just so sloppily, drunk and high and whatever all over the place that he even got into the neighbor's kid's bed by accident. So she was like on that level with that crazy freak out and jumping out the kid's window and messing, shaking down the room for whatever it was she was looking for, and the weird psychotic freakouts. Like clearly that was there was an amount of abuse that was off the wall here. But I do wonder though if it is somebody that's over medicated, and maybe the abuse is exacerbating the ADHD at some point. You know what I mean? It's really, if you're psychotic and you're not thinking straight, well, then it's like really bad ADHD. I will also say that I'm not making light of ADHD or whatever what they might some used to call it ADD, ADHD. People that have very severe cases of it, and I've seen some examples where they've been a danger to themselves and others. And that's not to diminish, you know, their
Hmm.
control or put them down. It's just saying that no, like it's a serious mental issue. So that's why there's serious medication around it.
So yeah,
Yeah. So if someone's abusing it, right? What's that going to happen? There's a lot of stuff going on. And once again, I'm not even really convinced that someone that had such a big break so recently in such a major way and it has all these other stresses going on, including like we'll get into this crazy situation with her employer, which does not at all seem on the up and up, right? When you look at when you do the math and you look where she was living and you look what she was making and the value of where she was living and all these other things, and then it doesn't make sense. And meanwhile, she's the one with her
mhm.
eye on all the money.
Yeah, totally. So, just to, not
Yeah.
lose the track here a little bit. So, the fact that she left abruptly, you would think it's probably connected to her over medicating on potential Adderall, right?
Yes and no, because I'm like, well, I don't think that she would. Yeah, yes, I think yes in terms of, yeah, it could be a side effect impacting her behavior and making her lose concentration. So maybe that's one possibility. I'm not saying that's the reason. I'm saying yeah, that's it. Now, someone might ask, what are you saying, Glenn? Is she going to go see a dealer? No, all this medication was like legal medication. It was legal medication being prescribed in a way that wasn't legal because she was paying cash to 2 out of 3 of the doctors so that her name never hit the systems that are supposed to catch you from getting overprescribed very extremely controlled medication. By the way, this medication is controlled like to the level of like cocaine or something. You know what I mean? It's like it's not a joke. It's not a joke to mess around. And this is by the way also one of the most abused besides OxyContin or something like that. It's one of the most abused prescription medications because like college students use it, all sorts of people use it that want to sort of stay awake and maintain concentration for long periods of time. But when you burn the candle at both ends, it just burns so much faster.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that's what I'm saying is part of me is not convinced that that there is necessarily a rational reason that she left that game or that anything specifically was going on. But then as we're about to get into, then there were actually some pretty good reasons where maybe
Hmm.
somebody could be looking to make some kind of quick exit.
Yeah, totally, man. We will get to it very shortly. Now, the second interesting point in this case for me was, after it was realized already that Heidi is already missing, and the first point of contact that was made by her ex-husband Jim Wayne was her current boyfriend Naeem Salam, the same vice president of operations at the Jan Zuckerberg Initiative, that Facebook's philanthropic organization. Now, this dude, Naeem Salam, he was actually living in San Francisco. He was not working in LA, so seeing each other for the couple was a little bit hectic. Now, the interesting detail in this point was for me definitely the fact that Heidi had apparently sent an alarming text message to Naeem shortly before she disappeared, and she texted something along the lines of, quote, "I'm afraid. Please come see me in LA." End quote, right? So something like that was sent to Naeem, but Naeem couldn't make it. We don't know why. Apparently he was busy with work, but apparently he couldn't make it to LA. So your thoughts on this situation? I want to add one more thing before I let you go over it. Apparently, Naeem at that point believed that Heidi was ghosting him. Because let's remember, Heidi was already missing for a few days and they haven't spoken in a while, meaning Naeem and Heidi. So Naeem actually assumed that Heidi was ghosting him. He was not aware that Heidi was actually missing until Jim called him and informed that his ex-wife is missing. So that's Naeem's point of view. That's his perspective. So your thoughts on that whole situation? I think it just adds, right? It probably just adds to her shaky behavior. You know what I mean? Or was she really scared of real things? Was she scared of a potential hit that was put on her head or something like that? Your thoughts, man?
Yeah, or even could it be, here's our favorite word, red herring. Could she have intentionally left breadcrumbs um, for other people to find later? You know what I mean? Like false clues.
Totally, totally.
Yeah, yeah. But I'll just mention I looked up both of them on LinkedIn because everybody knows in the show I live here in Southern California. I worked, I work, I've worked and worked across companies that intersect with some of the stuff we're talking about today. So I was kind of curious to see if we were closely connected at all. Heidi doesn't look like it. And then is his name Naeem? I'm sorry, the
Yeah, Naeem Salam.
name. I looked him up. It's interesting. He looks like he's like almost exactly my age. Uh, looks like he's probably had kind of a. I think he probably grew up here. It looks like he went to like a prestigious boarding school and then has like an Ivy League education. So interesting guy. I wonder that they weren't maybe that close. You know what I mean? Like maybe because it's like driving, like the fastest drive between San Francisco and LA, flying down the road 80 miles an hour is like about 4.5, 5 hours. Now somebody with the kind of money that he would presumably have, being a vice, even at a charity, vice president operations of charity, like a flight between San Francisco and LA is fairly inexpensive. It probably is just more the time to get through airport security, you know what I mean? And then like leaving LAX is kind of a pain in the butt, or Burbank, whatever. Burbank's easier. But yeah, so just me looking thinking of the logistics. Like it's kind of weird that he didn't come down, but maybe it makes you wonder if she also, once again, I hate to like kind of doubt her, but it makes me kind of wonder how much of what she did, was she really in her right mind that whole time, or was she sort of like a useful little like scapegoat assistant that like maybe they didn't fear that much because they could always maybe they didn't think things were going to go that bad, and they could always just point at her and say, "Oh,
Hmm.
that's our crazy account." And we just found out she was in a mental home 4 years ago. Oh my god. That makes me wonder, like, if that was part of it. Doesn't it seem kind of weird to you? This guy's like, this Mark Sugarman guy's not a nobody. He's like a big wheeler and dealer. Apparently, he owns the
Jason.
L.A. Jason, sorry, yeah, Jason. Is it Jason Sugarman?
Yeah.
Sorry, Jason Sugarman. He owns like doesn't he own like the Los Angeles FC club? I hope I don't get my Sugarmans mixed up. I thought that's what I read in the article.
I think
Um,
he was like I think the Jason Sugarman, Heidi's boss, he was
yeah,
the son-in-law to like some very rich dude from LA. I forgot
yeah,
his name. But then also he had, I think, a small stake in the Lakers as well. Like a very small stake. So yeah,
yeah.
definitely not nothing. And yeah.
So why is she like so you know what I mean? Why is she so lucky to get this like key assistant job? I mean, people for sure catch lucky breaks all the time, but part of that seems a little bit weird to me. But hey, maybe she was really talented. Um, I don't know. I wish we knew a little more about her background in that respect as well. I think it's like one of the few ones where we don't have a lot of like biographical information about the victim
Mm,
on the front end. Strange, huh? Even compared to like little children.
yeah,
This
totally.
one's kind of like a little bit blank. Yeah.
We'll get into more details, I think, about the boss soon enough. The second point that I want to stop here and talk a little bit about is the fact that when Jim Wayne tried locating Heidi's car, he noticed that the location tracking system was off on that Range Rover, which he found pretty odd and strange. And also, the location finder on Heidi's earbuds, as well as the Apple Watch, had also been turned off. And Jim Wayne's actual quote is, quote, "It was really odd. That had to be done deliberately. That had to be done deliberately, systematically." So he sees these things as foul play indicators. Do you see them as foul play indications as well?
Yeah, though one of the other YouTubers, Dr. Grande, had a good show on it. He made a good point that probably the person that knew how to do that the fastest and would probably even think about that would be Heidi. So that's why I was wondering is would somebody else, if it wasn't Heidi, would they know to disable all the tracking on all those different little devices? Food for thought.
Would they know how to, or would they know?
Well, would they know how to, and then would they know when to? I say that because I mean, even though a lot of young people listen to us that have like earbuds and stuff like that, know how to like update them and turn them on and off and know how they work and when they're tracking and when they're not. I wonder if your average person older than a millennial would, so someone closer to my age, and then I also wonder, would they even know of the devices that they would need? You know what I mean? So it's one thing to know how to turn it off. It's another thing to know that you have three or four of them on Heidi's person and car that you have to also disable.
I think disabling the tracking devices on her earbuds and the Apple Watch is one thing, but then disabling the tracking device on her
On
brand
the
new
car.
Range Rover is
Yeah.
like a whole nother level of expertise, right?
That's my question. Is it, or is it just as easy as calling up OnStar and saying, "Hey, please disable the tracking for for the time being until I tell you to turn it back on again."
You could be. I think it depends who's ordering
Yeah,
the tracking device to be off. If it's the
yeah.
owner, I think it's a lot easier than if it was an external person.
I don't, that's what I'm curious about because I mean, part of me, if this was like 10, 12, 15 years ago, I think it would be really easy for me to be patronizing and say, well, I don't see that little lady rolling up her sleeves and getting under the hood or, wherever it is that you have to flip the switch. Or if it's like a fuse you got to kill. But in this day and age, when everything's on YouTube, now I'm like, you know what? I could see anybody with a normal IQ and like enough incentive. So once again, there's that paranoia, right? So that's one of the side effects of amphetamines.
Hmm.
Methamphetamines is paranoia. a paranoid person or a paranoid schizophrenic, going away from drugs, not her, but someone else, could in fact and would probably figure out what fuse to pull, or what you need to flip on a switch, either in your car's diagnostic stuff. So from that I could see someone who's smart enough to be a comptroller, 100% is smart enough, I think, to figure that out, assuming she doesn't need some kind of weird tool. Yeah.
I just want to step in also. I think there might be a chance that to begin with, the car's tracking device was off. Maybe it was never even on, in the first place. I mean, that's a possibility.
Yeah, so the one thing about tracking devices, at least this is my experience from the past, let's say 20 years, going into car dealerships. Um, they push them pretty hard. So especially for her kind of car, because it's a big luxury, they're going to give her the hard sell at the dealership. Whether she's leasing it or not, they're going to say, "Hey, this thing's worth so much. Did you know that a car like this is stolen every day?" Blah blah blah. And they do the whole thing. And they say, "Guess what? For only $500 or $1,000 right now, on top of the price of the car, we'll give you low jack and this thing and that thing." And then so it's like 10. It's like, what I mean, compared to the cost of car, it's tiny. So I could see her. I can't see her not doing it. It's pretty hard to like tell them no, but I could see her then later calling LoJack or whoever and saying, "Hey, like turn this off. Like I
Yeah.
don't want to." Okay, so just I know I kind of beat that one to the ground,
No,
but
it's okay. It's
that was
okay.
just my 2 cents.
Yeah, all good, dude. All good. Okay, dude. Let's move on to the next few things. So, okay, I think we had a good discussion here regarding that fact. Now, I think the next interesting point is definitely the fact that her dog Seven had been found several days, before Jim Wayne even was attempting to get to the family's vet. And someone actually texted her work phone about Seven's location. Now, from what I understand, her dog Seven had a collar, and inside of that collar, there was Heidi's work phone number, so that if Seven would ever go missing, the person who would find them would actually know who to call. So someone actually texted a text message to Heidi's work phone about finding Seven in the, let's see here, in the Hope and Flower building, which is this building right here on the map. We can see it. It's a luxury apartment complex in downtown LA, right next to the Staples Center. So this is actually the location where Heidi's dog was found, and apparently her vehicle was also found somewhere in close proximity as well. Now, the dog was said to have been found on the 28th floor, just roaming around by himself. So, yeah, like this is a bizarre little point in the timeline, wouldn't you agree? I think law enforcement's main focus is how exactly did this occur. And then on the front end, I also want to quickly jump to some more CCTV, dude. For the audience members, we can see that after a while, when police manage to get their hands on the CCTV footage, we see, we now can see on the CCTV footage, we can see Heidi right now. She's wearing the sweater that was earlier on in the same day tied around her waist. We can see her walking the dog Seven in an alley behind the building. Now, the interesting point here is that a lot of people focused on her walking mannerisms, right? How she walked. So once again, let's wait until it loads. Look, they looked at how Heidi was walking here. You know what I mean? How she's walking here, and we could actually
Yeah.
look. And some people think that this is not someone who's in distress. So your take on this whole situation? What was she doing there? Why was the dog on the 28th floor? And do you have any like
Yeah.
things that jump to you?
Oh
You
yeah,
know?
man. Yeah. So I hope everybody be patient with me. Let me make this an exchange a bit though. Let me ask you, just in the front end, why why'd she bring the dog? Why'd she bring the dog that day? Do you think? I mean, what would be the normal answer? The normal answer would be that like she wanted the dog to get out of the house, right, and not maybe rip up stuff or be bored all day, or maybe not, if she doesn't have a doggy door, if she doesn't have a yard, maybe there isn't a place to poop unless she takes the dog out. Um, which this is all I know. This is, you know what I mean, this is all normal stuff for people with pets. You got to think through all this stuff. Yeah, so I mean, you know, the people don't like to leave the dog at home all day. The dog gets bored. Maybe the dog gets destructive or uses the bathroom in the house, etc. So I kind of get that part, but some of me just feels like the dog is a little bit of like an extra thing to think about. I don't know. I'm a little bit on the fence about it. I will say I found some of how she dealt with the dog, getting the dog into the car, a little weird, but maybe, you know how like she just let the leash drag on the ground while she was doing stuff with the car. Maybe that dog's good about not running away, but I know, like, you know, as a dog owner in the past in my life, you know, growing up and stuff, I would have never done that with my dog with a leash, like outside in the front yard like that, unless the dog was already running free. If it was a dog that I was at all worried about running into the street, you know what I mean? Um, that part seems a little weird to me, but whatever. Maybe the dog is, you know, just totally normal. But then the video that you showed with her walking it, I have to say what I noticed about it is, yeah, she doesn't look afraid. She looks like she looks all amped up. You know what I mean? She looks like she just drank about 5 cups of coffee or did some Adderall. Um,
Good point.
she's walking super fast. The dog can't even keep up with her, and that's not a small dog. You know what I mean? It's like a moderate sized dog. Um, okay, but they're walking along, and then someone might ask, well, like, why is she walking her dog um, behind a building? It was like in the alley, right behind the one of the buildings. It's because the dog probably has to take a crap. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's why you walk dogs when in places that aren't super great for it. Now, we've mentioned this. I know we've done episodes in the past that have touched downtown LA. Specifically, what was the one with the hotel?
Cecil Hotel, no?
Cecil Hotel. Yeah. So this is right by that. I mean, this is right. This is all in the same general area now. These specific apartments were actually, I think they hadn't been built yet when I used to work down there a few years ago. Because I used to work just north of the Staples Center in one of the shiny high rises, just north of there, so sort of north east. Anyway, yeah. So, but where that area is, I know where it's at. And yeah, there's what's crazy about downtown is, and it's even crazier now, as you might imagine, with all the you know, other stuff going on in politics and global health. Um, but this was already one of the most polarized parts, bipolar parts of Los Angeles. So this is like a extremes. You have like the place, the apartment where the dog was found would be like some of the very affluent people in Los Angeles, sort of living in a very like hipsterish, like rich hipster part of Los Angeles. But then right outside is literally just armies of homeless people everywhere. Like the Skid Row is not far from this at all. You could walk to Skid Row from this apartment relatively easily. And it's right down adjacent to some very rough areas. So that's like why anybody sort of in that area should really be careful, because there are many serious crimes that go on down there. Many of which you can find on YouTube, including like shootings and things like that, like every week. This stuff goes on down there. It's kind of crazy that it's so expensive. It's because they really thought, I guess, that it was going to like go one direction. And then I think things have sort of not all been towards luxury in terms of development. But regardless, it was interesting because I think her car was actually found in the parking garage of a different luxury apartment. Am I not correct with that?
This is the one thing I have no clue about, so if you could chime in, that would be amazing.
That's what I think. I think Dr. Grande said that part. And I thought that was interesting. I didn't see that in any other sources. So I don't know if everyone else also doesn't know that. What I do know is that I looked up while we were, doing stuff for the show. I looked up the developers for the building, and it was a Canadian company. And I don't know if they're still the owners or the same people that sort of seeming to have sat on their hands a little bit with the video footage until the police got a warrant. But I think that does potentially explain why maybe they did what they did, because if you think about it, a Canadian company, they may be actually subject to rules in their own country about what they can release without a search warrant, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like if you're a Canadian company, you also have to obey Canadian rules, right? Not just US rules. You have to
Yeah.
obey both. If you're doing business, if you're doing business in Southern California, right? If you're doing business in Southern California as a Canadian company, well, yeah, like US police may come and ask you to do something, but it's just asking, it's not forcing you yet with a warrant. And then it may be that maybe some rule in whatever part of Canada they're in, that says, hey, guess what? Like, we protect privacy more here. So unless the police have a warrant, you're not going to give them anything. I don't know, just food for thought, because that was the thing that bothered me too about this. I was like, why the hell wouldn't you help the police when they're trying to find a missing lady and they found her dog in your building, and you have like this expensive luxury building and someone's dogs, some random lady's dogs running around, like, on the 27th floor. How'd it get there?
Yeah, no, totally. That's a really good point. The fact that the management of this apartment complex didn't release this footage. I mean, it's definitely baffling, but maybe it was connected to the fact that they were a Canadian company. I didn't know that fact. The other interesting detail that you pointed out was the fact that maybe Heidi's car was found in a different apartment complex, or like a different parking lot of a different apartment complex. And that's definitely interesting to me. That would mean that's really strange. Like, that's really strange. But I think we can discuss all of these things when we go through the theories section. I want to quickly jump to another interesting points here. In the timeline, now, the one interesting detail that I found pretty bizarre actually is that on October 29th, 11 days after Heidi's disappearance, law enforcement entered her house with guns drawn. Now, I do believe they had already been inside of the house before October 29th. It wouldn't make sense that they would wait for 11 days to enter a house of a missing person for the very first time. But this is the little footage that we have of that encounter. We can see police officers enter Heidi's townhouse with guns drawn. Like, we can see this woman is holding what seems to be a shotgun, and everyone seems to be carrying something on them here for
Um,
sure.
Actually, I think she has a pistol with a flashlight on it.
Well,
I'm
potentially,
looking
but
at
but but
just
it's still a gun, right? It doesn't
Yeah,
really
yeah.
change much. So, dude, what do you think is happening here? Why are police entering the house 11 days after the fact? They already have been to the house, I would assume, or like maybe on day 4 or 5 of her disappearance, but now they go back in there. What do they expect to find? Some culprits inside of the house all of a sudden?
Yeah, it makes you wonder. It makes you think that they got a tip that maybe somebody might come back to that scene, or that maybe, they could have been hidden compartments that they hadn't looked for very hard. It is weird. It does seem like maybe they had expected to find someone who had broken in potentially. I don't know if they were. They don't look. They look cautious, but having seen a lot of videos like this, and actually having seen them do this to my house, as well as other houses in the area, when they're checking for burglars and things like that, but they know they're probably not there. Um, that's what it kind of reminds me of. Yeah.
Okay. Another interesting point, and I guess it will kind of connect to this point a little bit. If we would quickly jump on the map now, I want to quickly jump to Heidi's townhouse, and a lot of suspicion began happening when people realized that Heidi was renting out a house that's worth $1.7 million, and now she was working as a financial controller. She was making around $140,000 per year at this work. And she also was driving a brand new luxury SUV, the Range Rover. So some people are definitely questioning and raising their eyebrows when they find out that Heidi was living in this house. I don't know. Do you find this fairly suspicious? Like, she did seem like she was living above her means, just a little bit, right? Maybe like more than a
Yeah.
little bit.
I think this, I mean, aside from what we knew about her employer, this is probably the biggest, like, I guess, circumstantial piece of evidence that something was really shaky. If you just, you and I were talking about this before this, and if you do the math, you figure the mortgage and if not mortgage, then rental payment on a house that was $1.7 million is easily going to be, let's say, between, let's say, $6,000 and $10,000 a month. Let's put it closer to maybe 8 or 9, and then you add on the payment for a luxury car like that, which is probably going to be, I don't know, I'm guessing $800 to $1,000 a month for that kind of car, because it is a very like high end luxury car. Um, yeah, how could you afford? You can't afford that because 140K a year before taxes. Taxes are going to take 40% of that. So you know what I mean. What are you going to eat? It doesn't even leave enough money. It doesn't have any money left over for any other expenses or etc. So
Not you.
yeah,
I
so
think even before the food, it doesn't add up.
no, yeah, you're negative already, and then oh, and by the way, someone might ask, well, what about her ex-husband? Right, he was paying alimony, right? Nope, no, actually, when they got divorced, she took a lump sum, and I don't know what that lump sum was, but it sounds like it was not enough to explain the monthly expenses that she seemed to have over a pretty extended period of time.
Yeah, no, this is definitely crazy. At first, I didn't realize this fact, but now when we just talked about it, like right now, I kind of realized how bizarre this thing is. Like, it doesn't add up. She couldn't afford to be here, but the bills were paid one way or another. So it means that she did have money, or at least was getting funding by means that we do not know of at all. But I guess this is good for us because we now jump to the next interesting point that's connected to this interesting point, and it's her boss. Okay, the dude who stole from the Indians. Let me jump to his picture right here. I have. Oh no, this is by the way the ex-husband.
I gotta stress it's still so this
Of
just
course, of
to
course.
protect us, it is still alleged because it's, while his business partner I think was convicted for this in the case, he, I believe, is still, this is still being pushed through the courts. Still stuff going on, so obviously we have
Oh yeah,
to
yeah.
to say that, but that being said, yeah, I mean, so there's this, here's what was interesting is when you start to dig in on this aspect of the case, like, he's interesting. And I'm sorry, I kind of interrupted you. Maybe you were about to launch into something about Jason Sugarman specifically.
Not true, not anything so specific. Let me, I guess, finish off this interesting detail, and then you can also chime in here. So the only thing that I wanted to add about Jason Sugarman is basically that he is currently on trial for a massive financial fraud case, and apparently also the company that Heidi worked for, the Camden Capital Partners, is actually registered to Heidi's townhouse, and apparently Heidi is listed as the only employee, so that can't be right. Also, yeah, this man, Jason Sugarman, he had a partner inside of Camden Capital Partners, and that partner is already like serving a 15-year jail sentence, prison sentence, whatever you want to call it, right? And yeah, but this guy apparently is still a free man, even up to today, I think. So that's Jason Sugarman, definitely at least suspected to be involved in some very shady operations. Yeah, dude, what do you make of Jason Sugarman in this case? Do you think he's behind the disappearance, or we'll get into it more in the theories, but like what do you think, man?
Yeah, so I think this is really fascinating reading about, I mean, this weird company that suddenly, like I guess at some point, maybe it wasn't just officially her, right? It wasn't, I think at some point it wasn't just registered to her townhouse, but was registered somewhere else. And then, yeah, by the time this whole thing happens, once again, this makes no sense, right? I mean, this guy, this Jason Sugarman guy and his partners, and they're running these big schemes. And apparently they're people that have some like substantial reputations. Okay, well, like you couldn't just run that with one person. So that doesn't make sense. For one thing. And then especially just, I mean, poor Heidi would have lost her mind. No wonder she's doing 3 times the Adderall you're supposed to, to catch up. But no, I mean, in reality, I don't really know. It does make you wonder how much of that she was actually running. Now, what I think is even more interesting, besides all the stuff that Mr. Sugarman is accused of, he does have some extensive business dealings, and these other partners, like you mentioned, one of which, or a couple of which I think are in jail. I think there's uh, it's interesting because the brother of one of the other partners, um, he has a lot to say about kind of their connections to, he says, the Gambinos, which apparently, I guess I didn't even know this. One of the, it's organized crime family, but I didn't even know that one of them was in prison here until the like late 2000s, at which point like I think 2017 he was like deported back to Italy or something.
Can I step in
Yeah.
here to clarify? So, Jason Sugarman's partners at the Camden Capital Partners brother had connection to one of the Gambinos. So, Jason's partner's brother is connected to the Gambinos. That's the connection, right?
Okay, yeah, it's some weird thing, but there's like two brothers. So there's one brother that's actually like kind of like airing the dirty laundry about the family, about his brother and their father.
Mm-hmm.
And he says that they actually, like Goodfellas style, at one point talked about killing him so they wouldn't have to cut him in, this him being the brother that is talking to the newspapers.
Wait, wait, so
Yeah,
this is probably the brother of Jason Galanis, the guy who's
yes,
already serving. Okay, so just
exactly.
just to go over once more.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, just in case anybody's kind of
yeah,
confused what I'm talking about. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Jason Galanis' brother is saying that Jason Galanis was planning to kill him so that they wouldn't have to split the funds or of the shady stuff.
Yeah, he said it was in this article, one of the articles I mentioned. He said, look, like he mentioned it kind of offhand, almost like, look, just think they were planning to do that to me. So can you imagine anybody else that was at risk? And it wasn't even because he'd done anything to piss him off. It was just that, like Goodfellas style, they were like, if we have to split it 8 ways and we kill 4 people, now we only split it 4 ways, right? So it was
Jeez.
that's what he's alleging. No, that's a sideshow to our case a little bit, but I mean, it does give some big motive floating out there in terms of what this guy alleges. Now, also apparently, I'm not sure if this is also that same Jason. Sorry, the same Mr. Galantis. I think he was also connected to. It was either him or some other partner
Mm-hmm.
was connected to, but still part of this whole venture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, he was connected to, at one point, I guess, one of the biggest online adult pay, you know what I mean, like the companies that facilitate paying adult entertainment sites, when
Mm-hmm.
those were probably still more lucrative than they are now, because of changes in that industry. So he was involved in that. Now let's point it out, between the defrauding, the potential defrauding of Indian tribes, bunch of money. You've got potential mob connections. I don't know if any of that had to do with casinos, by the way. When I first heard the Indian thing, I kind of assumed, maybe wrongly, that it was going to be like, because there's a lot of money in the casino business and a lot of places like to get involved because it's, like one of the few ways you can do legal gambling in the United States besides Vegas, is the Indian reservations and the casinos there. So I was thinking about that. But anyways, regardless, the adult part, the fact that the Gambinos and maybe organized crime was already mentioned. I'm not pointing the finger. Far be it for me to ever point the finger at anybody, especially not the Gambinos, but who's somebody, right? So somebody like that. This is like a lot of, I think, compared to almost all the other cases that we've listened to recently, this is one of the first times where we have like a really solid, like, you know, this person was working with people who were dealing with a whole ton of money and a lot of businesses that were either in the gray area legally and or used to be businesses that were controlled by organized crime, like the adult industry, right?
Hmm. Yeah,
So, yeah.
totally. Okay, so Jason's definitely. I think we now painted a good picture about who Heidi's boss was. And the interesting detail that I have next is that Jason Sugarman personally said he believes that Heidi had ran off with the company's money. Now, this would kind of explain her lavish lifestyle. She had a high paying job, but definitely not something that she could afford. This beautiful townhouse, in a really nice neighborhood in Los Angeles, as well as now I want to jump to another CCTV. Jason, after getting the call from Jim Wayne, Heidi's ex-husband, in regards to Heidi's potential location, the next day when he was told that Heidi is missing, he arrived to Heidi's front door, and we can see him leaving some muffins or donuts on the by the front door, and then he left. So that's what Jason Sugarman did. Okay, so don't you think that's a little bit suspicious? Like, also like the fact that he literally does the slowest walk in
When you-
the Jesus Christ.
the first time you said that, I laughed. I did too. I was on mute before. Yeah, I mean, he does seem like he's trying hard to look like super extra casual. So
Yeah.
how much of this was theater? I mean, yeah, everybody says, why would you leave muffins? Why would you leave something perishable out in the sun? Um, I don't know. And then yeah, she's missing. So like, when's she gonna get the muffins? It doesn't make sense. But by the way, the one thing I do wonder is if that wasn't like theater, you know, for all of us, watching, then do you think that he didn't? Do you think he thought her ex-husband was making an excuse for her? Like he was in on it if there was something going on, or he was covering for somebody that it was turning maybe straight state's witness.
I'm not
So
sure.
you know what I mean?
I want to also add the fact that he told his assistant to call Jim Wayne and demand to get back Heidi's work laptop as it potentially contained sensitive information. Could this all be just his attempt to retrieve the work laptop? Maybe he really wants to get that work laptop, and maybe he just wanted to maybe go and see if he can find Heidi and just maybe like see if he's there. If she's there, I don't know if this is literally what he did, because like look how the CCTV like ends begins, dude. Now, if this is his only attempt to access the door, because I wish I had a longer version of the CCTV, then it's pretty quick. Like, look, he makes the decision to like he just touches the door, doesn't even wait, He pretty much places it here. If this is like his only interaction, then I think this is definitely someone who already knows he will not get the door opened. You know what I mean? Maybe it feels like that a little bit. And then the muffins is like pretty bizarre to me. Like, what with the muffins? I have no idea. So yeah, maybe like I guess I want to hear your reaction about about this dude, Jason Sugarman, specifically asking for the work laptop. Like, do you think because we can obviously put two and two together, it's either that the work laptop did have like sensitive information about like the clients that Jason Sugarman didn't want to get out into the press because maybe it's private information and everything's legal, or maybe that laptop contained shady information about Jason Sugarman that will do him harm. So it's either one or the other. So what do you think is happening here? Do you think that laptop actually contained like information about the clients that just rightfully so Jason Sugarman doesn't want to get out into the media or whatever? Or do you think that there's a shady angle to this whole situation?
If he did not have anything to do with what happened to Heidi, or like, if he's also wondering, let's say, then I could see him wondering if Heidi, before he realized that she was really missing, I could see him wondering because he's somebody who's being investigated, right? And that laptop, like if you were his lawyer, his attorney, you would say, hey, find that laptop because that's our evidence, that's our property, that's our case, and that's something that they could potentially use against us. And once again, it's like, well, they didn't even have a warrant for that necessarily,
Hmm.
right? So now, by the way, that's one of the things that's it's a little bit obnoxious. I mean, not that I want to take the defendant's side all the time, but if you're a defendant, like the police can't use something that they obtain without a warrant. But I believe in a lot of cases, if the police are sent something illegally by somebody else, that person might get in trouble. But they now have the thing that they can look at. Oh, what's this? Oh, well, we had to look at it to figure out what it was, right? No, oh, so anyways, that's so I would say that's what I would be paranoid about him. Like I almost wonder if he went over there if he didn't know, then he went over there to say, hey, like is this real? Like is she really gone? Like has she disappeared? Or has she like just disappeared because they're debriefing her in a district attorney's office somewhere? Um, to cutting a deal against me. But yeah, otherwise, I think to your point, it's like it's theater. And yeah, I mean, what was he gonna do? Break in? Otherwise, right? So it's like, what else does he do? That he does this like weird token like appearance, and just to kind of make it look like he doesn't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Let me just finish this thought because when you showed me this in the map, I didn't want to interrupt you before. Two things. One, he apparently knows where she lives, right? So all this stuff about like, oh, we don't. I mean, did he ever wonder if he didn't know if he didn't know anything about what this money and this and that about where she was getting paid or she was taking extra money? Well, like, did he ever wonder why his company was suddenly registered out of her house, or
Yeah.
why how she was living there. By the way, just if you pull back on the map view, the one thing I want to point out about how ridiculous housing prices are here in California um, is that that's a freeway, right? She could almost hit the freeway with a football. Like if she was like Peyton Manning, she could probably hit the freeway.
Yeah.
And that's how much a house costs next to a friggin' what 10-lane freeway.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's
Wow.
crazy. That's definitely crazy. LA prices are like through the
Ugh.
roof, you know what I mean? It's crazy. Okay, dude, really good, really good. I guess we ran over a bunch of stuff already. One last thing that we have to talk about before we jump into the theories in this case is that in late November of last year, law enforcement conducted a search at a landfill in Chiquita Canyon. Okay, so this was happening, I think, late November. This is like a month and a half, a little less than a month and a half after Heidi's disappearance. And this search was sparked after law enforcement found undisclosed forensic evidence at the Hope Plus Flower apartment complex. So, just to paint the better picture, dude, for everyone who's watching this on the YouTube channel as well, law enforcement found forensic evidence, I believe, in the 28th floor of this apartment complex where Heidi's dog Seven was found by one of the occupants. And that forensic evidence, whatever that may be, sparked a search in Chiquita Canyon landfill. Okay, it's basically a landfill. Not really sure what they do out here, but we do have some pictures of what was happening, dude. So this is the search. Whatever they found in the apartment complex like sparked this search in the landfill, and these are the pictures from the search. Dude, what do you think these people are trying to find here in the Chiquita landfill, and what exactly was found in the apartment complex that would lead, I'm sorry, law enforcement to this landfill?
Gosh, it really makes you wonder if they found like burned up something, like burned up clothing or papers or something signature that maybe they hoped if they could find little pieces of that thing in one area that it would find other clues, dumped. So I'm assuming that this landfill is probably being used by one of the sanitation
Mhm.
agencies that's in one of those buildings. I mean, either the building they had just searched or one of the other buildings, like the apartment complexes, something.
It's like trash for their trash, right?
Oh yeah, that's what it is. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. Landfill is landfill is a nice way of saying dump. So that's what we do. We find places, we fill them up with trash, then we pile dirt on top of them, and then they build houses on top sometimes.
Perfect. Okay, so that's what's happening here, right? So police at this point believe that maybe Heidi's body or some sort of indication or clues to her disappearance may have been thrown into the trash, like maybe her, like, I don't know, her sweater, or like maybe shoes, or maybe even her body somehow potentially was thrown into the dumpster or something like that, right? Because I think police heavily suspect that something, that Heidi also was in the apartment complex, like, you know what I mean? If her dog was inside of the apartment complex on the 28th floor, then I think it's pretty safe to say that Heidi also was in the apartment complex, most likely as well. So, if someone would kill Heidi in this apartment complex, how would they dispose of her body? They would probably want to throw it into the dumpster if they can't find a better way to do it. And I guess if you throw the body into the dumpster, it would eventually end up in the landfill, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because I was thinking like, how would you dispose of a body? And why were they looking in the trash? It's like, yeah, they must be because they think that maybe she got pushed down a chute. Because I'm thinking an apartment like that would have a chute, but then if you did something like that, you'd always have to be worried about whether you were caught on video. So whether the chute itself or the dumpster or both, or even trying to go around that, go to another floor and then, drop it off there to sort of mislead anybody, looking for blood smears or things like that. Yeah, it's just, it gets, obviously gets very grisly, but it also gets, from a practical sense, it gets awkward too, because then, are you this person carrying these weird bags down the hall to the trash chute? I don't know how that works for really tall buildings like that. But even going to like a dumpster someplace else, maybe, I don't know, but I guess just conceivably, maybe somebody who would do something like that wouldn't use the trash chute in the same building they did the crime in. If they had done some degree of planning, maybe they would just chuck it in some random dumpster that wasn't being carefully watched, let's say by, like a pre-scoped location that doesn't have security cameras.
Hmm. Well, that's a good point, dude. Interesting thoughts. And I think at this point, it's probably a good time for us to really jump to the theories, right, in this disappearance case. And yeah, so as I've said, there are a few prominent theories, and I think we could just go over them. So I think the first theory that's really, really jumps out to us is that apparently that Heidi may have ran away with some of the company's money and started a new life. Now, the cons for this theory are the obvious abandonment of her son that she loved very much. Also, that there is no trace of her found. She doesn't seem like she would be someone who would be okay with just leaving everyone. She also had spoken to her relatives shortly before she disappeared, and she made some plans to visit them for the upcoming holidays. I think the Thanksgiving holidays. She also is suspected to be murdered by law enforcement and that she was hit with foul play. So, her running away with the company's money, the only pros in the way I see it is the fact that she was able to live above her means. Her house was something she could not afford, but she was managing to live there somehow. So that's would maybe indicate that she was potentially siphoning some money from the company to her own account, but I'm not really sure how that really would work, so I don't want to speculate in that sense for too much. I think it's an unlikely theory, and I think the other theories that we will talk about are more likely than this one. So, your thoughts on the, she ran away, start a new life with the company's money theory?
So one of the thoughts I had was, this maybe answers the why bring the dog question. Because I thought to myself, why would you bring the dog if you had all this weird stuff going on that day? And what I thought was, oh, but if you were planning to disappear, maybe that would be the nice, if you actually cared about that dog but weren't going to bring the dog and wanted to pretend that you had been sort of disappeared by somebody, Jimmy Hoffa. I wonder if you would bring the dog and let it loose someplace safe, like inside a building, because then you could kind of feel good to yourself, like, look, that's going to fit the narrative that I disappeared, that something happened to me. Nothing happens to the dog, right? Because if she's gone for 3 days and the dog could actually die, right, in the house. If nobody gets to the townhouse in time, maybe the poor dog dies. So like maybe that's the act of compassion from somebody who's trying to um, check off all the boxes before she leaves her life.
Hmm. That's a good point.
Yeah.
The dog is definitely a good point.
It's putting a lot on the dog, I know. Yeah, just for the rest of what you said, I mean, one of the things I think Dr. Grande asked was like, well, if she stole money, why wouldn't you know, Jason Sugarman report it? And the theory was, well, maybe the money she stole was also stolen, was already stolen. She was maybe she stole money that wasn't being claimed for income reporting purposes. You know what I mean? Maybe
Yeah.
she was stealing money that was being laundered, potentially, which is, where we talk about potential connections to organized crime and businesses that were already connected to strange revenue streams, and adult and et cetera, that kind of stuff. So yeah, and then finally, I think you've already made all the major points on that. I did wonder, like, well, why wouldn't she leave with her boyfriend? Um, and I feel like maybe we already answered that, because maybe he's really not that. Maybe it's not that strong a relationship.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, we all get lonely, right? That doesn't mean you want to marry the person that you're not being lonely with. So
Hmm.
that's, yeah, just my or whatever. You don't want to run off and commit massive fraud. By the way, I don't think that guy. Let me just defend. I mean, I'm not insinuating that he would ever be in on anything like that either. So maybe that also would just be a deal killer right away. Is that guy would say, no, I'm not going to ruin my life, and get hunted down by the mob.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
I don't think there's, at least on my end, I also have no suspicions for Naeem Salam, the boyfriend of Heidi's, right? The relationship didn't seem that strong for sure. Jumping to the next theory in this case, it's the theory that Heidi may have suffered another psychotic episode that led to her demise, if I should call it like that, right? She did act fidgety in that baseball game. She did leave abruptly, and yeah, from the CCTV that we can see right now on the screen, she does seem like she's walking and determined. Like she may, like the point that you made that she might be high on Adderall at that particular CCTV footage also like kind of makes sense. Now, yeah, I don't know. The last time she had a psychotic episode was in 2015. And this was happening in 2019. Well, from all we know, at least the last time a major psychotic episode happened, it was like 4 years ago. So I don't know. I don't know how much weight I hold for this theory as well. But as I was researching it, at first I was suspecting foul play way more than I do now. I kind of now am lenient in between these two theories, because I'm not really sure what happened to Heidi, but when I read her previous psychotic episode, like the description, how she was like jumping on people's like rooftops and like switching electrical circuits of the whole street on and off while she was partially clothed, like that's insane, right?
It was like, how did she even know how to do that? You know what I mean? Like that's kind of amazing. So that maybe she really did disable her car's tracking, right? If she could do it for the entire block,
Yeah.
maybe her car is like a cinch.
But I want to step in really quickly. She did manage to rise through the ranks, even though the company was shady. I mean, one would even say that for a shady company, you need to be an even better financial controller than for a regular company. So I don't know. I don't know how she managed to rise through the ranks after having such psychotic episodes. Maybe this is an indication that she did, in fact, fix her life completely, and maybe maybe like she was in good, like her mental health was completely fine. We don't really know if she was having any problems around the time when she disappeared. The fact that she managed to have this well-paying six-figure job was pretty good, like a pretty good indication that she was okay.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. I'd really like to know. I mean, maybe she really is just a stellar person where it's like feast and famine, right? She's either doing brilliantly and engaged in her work and doing great, or she's just a mess, maybe. I mean, because it sounds like it kind of goes back and forth. Though admittedly she wasn't really that old yet. I don't know. It's odd to me still though that she got this particular position, but maybe it made her ideal. Maybe the fact that she was a little bit damaged at that point in terms of, like it might be a little bit harder to get a
Hmm.
job if you've had a psychotic break, or you might have to at least admit to that. If they do if they do a background check and they're like, hey, why were you living in this group home for a year?
But how would her dog be stranded on the 28th floor in this
Yeah,
in this
that's
scenario?
I mean, I feel like it still fits, but once again, it's like it's really similar to other cases. I had a weird random thought that what if we find out someday that like apartment buildings eat people? Um, there's like, what if there's some weird dimension X that we just turn upside down and all these people fall out of, that somehow fell in there, like Brian Schaefer and everybody else.
Yeah.
It's really weird to me because it seems like this is a common theme, right? There's a common theme is there's some like non-zero amount of people that either go into buildings and never leave again, and you're like, well, what happened to them? Or it's sort of like this is similar to some of these other cases where you've got a parking garage, you've got like gated security that somehow people still get their cars into. Like the fact that she got her car, whether or not it was the same building, I think all the parking garages around there have a lot of like gates and things you have to do. I'm kind of amazed once again that her car wasn't immediately towed for like not having, let's say, a parking placard for where
Mm,
she was parked. So that's odd to me.
totally.
Um, and maybe she caught them. Things have been more relaxed with the lockdown and everything. Um, yeah, I don't. I have trouble with this theory. This theory I have trouble with because I don't understand what could have happened to her body that isn't one of those kind of like opportunistic criminal kind of theories. You know what I mean? So she has a psychotic. Well, I guess that's combining the psychotic episode theory with like the next one. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's like the idea that she was vulnerable, and someone took massive advantage of her and either still has her prisoner now
Hmm.
or killed her and got rid of her body. I don't know.
Yeah, but it seems to me that she was definitely inside of the apartment complex because the dog was left in the apartment complex. So if she's in the apartment complex, she somehow goes on a psychic episode as she's in the apartment complex. She leaves the dog on the 28th floor or whatever, and then just leaves the dog, goes on a, I don't know, I really don't know, just
Yeah.
brainstorming, just trying to brainstorm right
No, it
now.
makes sense because yeah, it's like how does the dog get up there? It doesn't seem like the dog could have gone in on its own, right? Because there's not like fire escapes. All the doors are like all those buildings. Like you usually have to have a key or something or key fob or something to get into. So it seems like she probably. I bet you she came in behind somebody at the apartment after getting into either the front door or the parking garage, if that was the same building. Um, I bet you she got in right after somebody in an elevator or through the front lobby, and then jumped on an elevator and just got off on a floor. And then, just like her C-section scar was just like, oh, who are you, doggy? But they're just like, oh, just lost interest and then walked off. Yeah. But then what happens to her after that? So that's like the rest of that disappearance where it's like, okay, how likely is it that someone's going to basically abduct her? Maybe, maybe,
Yeah,
maybe it's a lot
maybe.
higher. Yeah, maybe it's higher. Maybe it's a lot higher than my skepticism thinks it is.
Right. Well, I think it's good to jump to the last theory this week is that Heidi's disappearance was because of foul play, and I think the people in her business, in her personal work life, jump to me the most. If we are gonna discuss this, namely, probably the same Jason Sugarman. So, yeah, dude, what are your thoughts? Oh yeah, sorry.
Yeah, sorry. I feel so bad because when we went over this, there was one thing I forgot to mention. There was actually the whole reason for my big preamble in the beginning of the episode. One of the people that was involved with the company she worked for in some other dealings. Now there's some allegations that maybe it was also that this one that's being prosecuted right now and that he supposedly maybe got a slap in the hand. But Hunter Biden, of all people, turned up in this case. And apparently there's some emails that sort of don't look so good between him and um, the guys involved in this company, the people involved in this company. Um,
Yeah.
we got. I mean, I would say that compared to the corruption and money that gets stolen on the political level, whatever he was involved in was like probably small potatoes, right? So this isn't us taking shots at anybody's, at any president or anybody president's son. We're just saying that like, you know, this person, our missing person, was involved with a company that was involved with some very prominent people that had a lot to lose, and in fact, maybe are losing that now. So, okay, sorry, just wanted to get that in there
Of
because I know
course,
you're
of
about to
course.
lay out, yeah, the foul play.
No, the foul play, I don't really have all that much to lay out. Like, I'm just kind of thinking and brainstorming. I mean, the setup is pretty straightforward, right? Heidi potentially knows sensitive information that will harm Jason Sugarman. Therefore, Jason Sugarman orders a hit on Heidi, and Heidi dies. So, this is the whole theory, right? But then, how does it work? Logistically, like in the logistics wise. So Heidi is agitated by something in the football game. She leaves abruptly to this apartment complex. She may have been meeting someone at that apartment complex, and she may have met with someone from Jason Sugarman's, or maybe himself, right? She gets into one of the apartments in that apartment complex. She's killed, or one way or another transported out of the apartment complex. Her dog is left inside of the apartment complex. Her stuff, personal belongings, are like the tracking locations are switched off, and her body is somehow disposed. That's, am I missing something? Is that like the logistically, is that how this would work?
I think so. Um, I'm not sure when the tracking stuff was switched off. It sounds to me, I may be wrong. I thought that maybe her tracking stuff was switched on at an earlier point before she started running around, doing her stuff for the day, at least that day, if not earlier. So
Oh,
that's where I'm not clear.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not clear if maybe she had been already, which, like, once again, there's like prosaic explanations for that, that maybe, paranoia induced by drug abuse.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but, but, let me ask you, in this whole prosecution and thing that's going on with people, who have maybe stolen tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, depending on how far you think they've gone in their crimes. And I'm not pointing at any specific person, but I'm saying, if she was in the position to know about, and it sounds like she was, because she was the controller, unless that was just a ceremonial title, and the whole thing was just a shell game with her being one of the shell corporations. But if that's not true, then if she actually knows where some of the figurative financial bodies are buried, she's the weak link, right? In the whole thing, she's the one that the district attorney would go to try to, um, become state witness, right?
Yeah, totally. Um, but
She's the one, right? But so what happens to, so I don't know, in famous organized crime cases, what happens to people that are like in a position to do damage to the organization?
yeah, they get killed, right? But then
Yeah.
let's. Okay, so Jason Sugarman. I mean, when you looked into that guy, yeah,
Well, I want, let me just step back. I'm not pointing the finger at him. He's one of several people who were involved with a bunch of stuff. He's, like you said, he's under investigation, and she worked for him, but they did business with a lot of other entities. So I can't, you know what I mean? So even it's not unheard of for somebody, for some of these entities, maybe
mhm.
to to get rid of somebody, who doesn't work for them, just because they do business with them and they could hurt them.
Yeah, oh, I think so. I
You know what
think
I mean?
I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's definitely plausible. I'm not really sure how often this happens in America. It feels like something like this would be happening in other parts of the world. You know what I mean? America seems kind of,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, you're right. I mean, you're right. When it comes to, like, kind of, let's say, civilians, so, because, like, whenever you talk about organized crime and things like that, yeah, like, usually people, even people doing like some of the clerical work, let's say, the office work, generally they're exempt. But when it comes to organized crime, this is why I think about this. This is like kind of my pet. I like watching mob movies. I like watching Sopranos, things like that. I like kind of like the whole, sociology, I guess you'll call it, or social anthropology of criminal organizations. Interesting to me. I've actually studied like Russian organized crime, right after, the fall of the wall, stuff like that. So it's interesting to me, sort of the differences between these different kinds of criminal organizations. But the one thing that is in common is that, um, it is, even like high ranking people in these criminal organizations, when it gets to the point where prosecutions happen, um, and those people could bring down even more powerful people, even the most powerful will get, it actually is a lot more common than you think, for powerful organized crime people, or people that are in positions where they could do damage to be gotten rid of. You don't hear about it happening as much anymore, but it used to happen a whole heck of a lot. Um, I think the problem is our attention span and sort of our, I mean, there's like things that aren't on our radar that happen just because they haven't really happened either near us or
Hmm.
they just don't happen as often. But yeah, it definitely still happens.
Okay. No, I think it definitely still happens. That's a good point. And I guess, okay, so to conclude, like the whole show, the whole case this week, dude, I think let's try to, yeah, let's conclude with what we
Yeah.
think happened in this case. So I think I'll start first to give you a little bit of a breather. So personally, I think that definitely didn't start a new life. Don't see that happening because I don't think she would leave her son, who like texted her immediately after. Definitely think she's like dead, unfortunately. But now, how is she dead? Well, how it happened, I mean, I don't know. The psychotic break is very disturbing that she experienced in 2015. I think someone who experiences that kind of a psychotic break could definitely end up accidentally killing themselves for sure. But then there was no body found, and in the last few years, she has been acting normal, and she was even a financial controller. So from that, I kind of gauge that a psychotic event probably didn't happen. Maybe the psychotic event was actually linked to drug abuse, and maybe she wasn't abusing drugs anymore at the time of her disappearance. So maybe there wasn't even a possibility of the psychotic break happening in the first place. And since there was so much shady stuff connected to her work and her living above her means, and then police running into her house with guns and then also searching landfills, I definitely am leaning towards that Heidi Planck met with foul play and she was killed. I don't know why she was killed, but I definitely think that she was murdered and her body is disposed of. So that's my conclusion. What are your thoughts about this disappearance case?
Yeah, I think I'm in the same camp you are. Because everybody else. I mean, we already reviewed the other two theories and this one. We already talked about the boyfriend, the husband. I wanted to speak up about him for a second. We haven't talked about him much at all. The ex-husband. He seems like a real good guy. I mean, if anything, unlike people in other cases we've seen, he's been very much like very very aggressively like let's find answers and I want the truth, and trying to give a lot of information that he's heard about. Well, according to him, the police think it's a homicide. Like that's everything that he's. I mean, they've kind of hinted as much as well, but he's been trying to hint as much as he can give and try to give extra information. And he said some very like interestingly specific things like, they think that 1 to 5 people know exactly what happened. It's a sort of interestingly exact number of people, and it kind of adds up to some of the number of people we have like involved with some of the company dealings, right? So that's interesting to me. Yeah, I think that she knew too much, some power, maybe not even the person she worked for, maybe somebody without his, outside of him, somebody that could have been damaged by him being damaged or by their dealings being discovered, whatever it was, made her disappear because she had the most to lose. Sorry, she had the least to lose by going to the law, and they had the most to lose by her assisting in an investigation. And she was exactly the right position to know where all the, where was what financially, if she really did what she said she did. And if she didn't do, if she wasn't really the comptroller and that was just a ceremonial thing and she was helping them kind of launder money or whatever, or, a shell corporation net, well, then she still would be a powerful witness to that there was that kind of chicanery going on. Either way, I think that probably they somehow lured her to another location. I don't believe any of the claims from Sugarman that she was embezzling money. Um, I think anything that she was taking, he probably knew about and was approving, because I can't imagine that he knew where she lived and what he was paying her and think that something else was going on. Um, yeah. Okay. So,
Yeah.
apologize to the audience. I know I was a little rant heavy. today. I think I had very strong feelings about this one for some reason, maybe because it's local and it kind of touches on some of the stuff that I like. But yeah, I mean, this is like a really fascinating case. I'm really interested to see like if anything else comes out of this, because this is like, this is where I live. This is kind of scary to think. And this is somebody who, I mean, honestly, both she and her boyfriend, some of the people involved in this case probably know people that I know. So from that perspective, it's pretty interesting and baffling.
You better watch out, man. They're gonna come.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, dude. Anything you want to add before we sign out, man? This was a
Hey
good show.
man, just just lots of great comments. If anything, everybody's been too nice lately. Yeah, really great discussions. Loving seeing the subs build, and we hope that I know Juras is we really like the feedback on the format, because I know this is something Juras has really been pioneering to try to make sure that we structure the show in a way that makes sense for your listening habits. So thank you.
Exactly, guys. We'll catch you on the next week's show, and I hope you all enjoyed. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already, if you would like to see more of this stuff. And we'll catch you on the next week's episode. Until then, stay safe and peace out.